Rhonin's saviour had been none other than Deathwing. But the dragon did not wish to harm the mage. In fact, he wanted him to succeed in his mission to save Alexstrasza. When Rhonin recovered, Deathwing came to him in human form. Naturally, Rhonin sought to defend himself, attempting to bind the dragon with magic. But Deathwing easily shrugged off the magical bonds. He had Rhonin's full attention when he melted a rock to liquid magma just by pointing his finger at it. Deathwing told Rhonin that he mourned the dragon's dwindling numbers and sought to unite the flights, which were now separated through hostility and infighting. What Deathwing wanted in part was the artifact the Orc Necro Skullcrusher used to subdue Alexstrasza, the Demon Soul. This unassuming golden disc had been crafted by Deathwing millennia ago. Each aspect offered a portion of their power to the disc, all except Deathwing, who at this time was known as Neltharion. The disc gave Deathwing dominance over the other flights, but now it was in the hands of the Orcs. Not only did Deathwing seek the Demon Soul, but he also wanted something more, something even more valuable to him. While Rhonin did not trust the dragon, he had no choice but to accept his aid. Deathwing made him a small silver medallion with a dark jewel at its centre. The amulet allowed him to easily communicate with Rhonin, even over great distances. Deathwing would be able to guide Rhonin through Khazmodan and Grim Batol, where the Dragon Queen was held. Deathwing delivered Rhonin as close to Grim Batol as he could, without the mage being discovered by the Orcs. Allowing Rhonin to rest, he was only a few days on foot from Grim Batol. As he started to move to his chosen route, Deathwing's voice immediately entered his mind. The path Rhonin chose would lead him straight to the Orcs. Deathwing showed the mage a vision of the path he should take. While the terrain was perilous, Deathwing insisted this was the only safe route to Grim Batol. Rhonin's hesitation irritated the dragon. Although he was attending to business elsewhere, through the medallion he had the power to physically force Rhonin to take his first few steps. Shocked by the dragon's abilities, Rhonin continued on this route. Luckily, Deathwing could not read Rhonin's mind, as he started to formulate plans to escape Deathwing's gaze. Deathwing guided Rhonin, providing the mage with food as he journeyed closer toward Grim Batol, and even transport in the form of a goblin zeppelin. Every now and then, Rhonin would glance over his shoulder, half hoping to see Varisa to know she was okay, but also hoping that the elf had returned home to safety. Duncan and Moloch's deaths already weighed heavy on Rhonin's conscience, and he did not want Varisa and Volstad to have joined them in death for the sake of his mission, especially as he had had to keep the true goal hidden from them. When the Zeppelin dropped Rhonin off, an irritated Deathwing once again took control of the mage's body. The goblins had attempted to trick Rhonin before arriving to their destination, trying to get him to leave the Zeppelin and fall several hundred feet. Both Deathwing and Rhonin had seen through this trick, but Rhonin stopped Deathwing from punishing the goblin as he saw fit, with death. This time, Rhonin could not stop him. Deathwing forced the mage into casting a fireball, and the burning remains of the Zeppelin and the screaming goblins plummeted to the ground. Luckily, the wind carried away any sounds of destruction, as the goblins had dropped Rhonin off right in front of an entrance to the Orcs' base of Grim Batol. Rhonin found himself wandering round the winding passages for hours. There seemed to be no rhyme or reason to how they were designed. Passages would abruptly end, or suddenly dip or rise upward, as if the tunnellers changed their minds halfway through. Eventually, Rhonin sat for a rest, but he was startled to hear orcish voices, realising he had drifted off. But the voices were not closing in on him, as the odd acoustics of the caverns would have him believe. Deathwing had inexplicably been silent as Rhonin ventured through the Orc's lair, but now he had direction, doing his best to use the Orc's voices as a guide. As Rhonin heard the voices grow louder, he gained confidence in his direction and picked up his pace. As soon as he did this, he stumbled directly into 2 orc warriors. Luckily, the orcs were more surprised to see Rhonin than he was them, so he pressed his advantage, casting a powerful spell that shunted one of the orcs into the nearby cave wall. The orc's body merged with the wall until no trace of him remained. The other, now bristling with rage, charged Rhonin, madly swinging his axe at the wizard. Rhonin desperately searched his mind for a spell to distract the orc, and as he dodged, he noticed the orc's grim trophy. Around the orc's neck hung dozens of severed fingers. Elf, human, and whatever other unfortunate Alliance soldier met their end by the hand of this brute. This gave Rhonin an idea for a distraction. With a wave of his hand, the digits came to life. The fingers made their way up to the orc's neck and began to gouge at the soft flesh around his throat. The orc made a desperate bid to free himself of the fingers, but they kept going, ripping and clawing at his throat as if driven by vengeance. The orc collapsed to the floor, his chest coated in his own blood. Rhonin cautiously made his way over to find that both the orc and the digits were now lifeless. Eventually, Rhonin came to another turn in the cavern system and heard voices emanating from within. Rhonin carefully looked round the corner to find a huge cavern bustling with activity. The orcs looked as if they were preparing to depart on a long journey. Had their situation become so dire in the war that now more soldiers were being called to the front? This did not just seem like reinforcements, however. These preparations looked as if a majority, if not all the orcs from Grim Batol were departing. What perplexed Rhonin further was the orcs' cargo. Dragon eggs in various stages of development. Why would the orcs risk damage to such precious cargo by moving it from Grim Batol? Before Rhonin could think of an answer, a voice permeated his thoughts. Human. Rhonin. Where are you? Deathwing was once again contacting the mage. The dragon had caught only a glimpse of the orc's retreat through the medallion, so asked the mage what he had seen. Rhonin lied, saying the orcs were at battle practice. Deathwing once again took control of Rhonin, forcing the mage to hold the amulet up. A battle practice. I see. And is this how they practice their retreating? Deathwing made no further comment on Rhonin's lie, which if anything worried him more than if the dragon had. Deathwing informed him that he followed the wrong path, and something in the dragon's tone told Rhonin that he knew the orcs would be retreating. Rather than question Deathwing, Rhonin followed his instruction. Deathwing led Rhonin to the Dragon Queen's chamber, a journey of several hours. As Rhonin travelled, he heard goblin voices among the orcs. Perhaps this is how Deathwing knew of their retreat, and how he knew the cavern's layout so well. Deathwing deactivated the protective spells around the Queen's chamber, allowing Rhonin to enter. Alexstrasza, barely able to move, restrained by chains and clamps, looked toward Rhonin, her eyes widening with fear. Not for herself, but the mage. She managed to fight her restraints enough to say no, step back, but too late. Rhonin heard Deathwing utter, "Perfect." A blinding light surrounded the mage, agony coursing through his body. As he collapsed, all he could hear was Deathwing laughing and repeating the word, "Perfect." Rhonin slowly began to regain consciousness when he was roughly brought to his feet. He woke up with a start when an orc broke one of his fingers. Standing before him was Necros Skullcrusher, leader of the Dragonmaw clan's dragon breeding program. He immediately began to question Rhonin. "You've one chance for life. Where's the rest of your party?" Rhonin told the truth that he came alone, but was met with more threats. He began to answer the orc with what he thought he wanted to hear. Necros, a heavily scarred orc with a missing leg, made sure to beat Rhonin whenever the mage paused or didn't give him the answer he wanted. Necros believed the Alliance had sided with Deathwing, and a small party had been sent ahead to free Alexstrasza. These were lies, fed to him by his goblin double agent Krill, who worked for Deathwing. Nekros used Rhonin's answers to fuel this theory, gloating to the mage that the orcs would be long gone before the Alliance arrived. Alexstrasza told Nekros that his actions were insane. Rhonin got his first good look at the Lifebinder. Captivity had clearly not treated her well. Her restraints only allowed eating and speaking with great effort. Her scales, which must have once been a brilliant ruby, were now faded and loosening, and her eyes were tired and dull. Infuriated the dragon had spoke without his permission, Nekros' hand darted into a pouch he carried, which caused the Dragon Queen to cry out in pain. None questioned Nekros, only his chieftain, Zuluhead the Whacked. This explained to Rhonin how the orcs had held Alexstrasza for so long, a hugely powerful artifact that it was likely Nekros did not understand fully. If he did, the entire horde would bow to him. Nekros did understand that the disc he kept had great power, for he planned to use it to fight Deathwing himself. Nekros instructed his soldiers to throw Rhonin in a cell for later questioning. Through blurred vision, Rhonin made eye contact with Krill. The goblin winked at Rhonin, and he saw the creature now held Deathwing's medallion, affirming to Rhonin that they all danced to the Black Dragon's tune. After being roughly dragged to his cell and waking up from unconsciousness, an experience that must have been becoming tiresome to the mage, being unconscious that long is, super bad for you, Rhonin was met by a bone-chilling image. Nekros had clearly followed after his guards to place extra security measures on Rhonin's cell. Staring back at Rhonin was a flame golem, unmoving, silently standing guard. Studying the construct, Rhonin could feel no heat from the flames emanating from it, but knew that the golem would burn all it touched. Knowing he had to at least try and escape, Rhonin slightly moved his hand to prepare a spell. No sooner had he done this, the golem's hand darted for Rhonin's. The unrelenting pain coursed through him, the burning pain so intense it felt as if the golem's fire burnt his very soul. When Rhonin was finally released, still reeling from the pain, he heard a harsh, grating voice. It belonged to Krill, Deathwing's spy. Since Rhonin was destined for death, Krill had come to tell someone about his master plan, a plan he couldn't keep to himself, but one he didn't want anyone of importance knowing. The goblin was tired of following orders, and now sought to make the Black Dragon aspect his slave. Producing Deathwing's amulet, which the dragon had thought destroyed or lost when Rhonin's body collapsed, Kirill removed the black stone from the centre of the medallion. As this was actually a scale of Deathwing, Kirill believed he could use it to bend the dragon to his will. Rhonin had once heard, to bear some bit of the greatest of the Leviathans is to have a hold on their power. But it had never been done, and the goblin would need tremendous magical power to make this work. Rhonin became agitated by Krill's plan, and the golem began to stir again, reaching out to Rhonin. The mage immediately froze, holding his breath. The giggling Krill left Rhonin to his fate. When Rhonin exhaled, the golem once again had hold of him, and Rhonin, yet again, lost consciousness. Rhonin drifted in and out of waking and dreaming. When he first woke, the golem was no longer there, but as soon as Rhonin even moved a hair, the beast rematerialized, making its presence known. The golem would unwaveringly guard whatever Nekros told it to do, as it was a manifestation of the demon soul that the orc possessed. Rhonin found his thoughts and dreams turning to Varisa, remembering his companion with great fondness. The Varisa of his dreams began to speak, pulling him back to the waking world when all he wanted to do was stay. As his dream faded, the voice became clearer. Rhonin began to hear another voice, yet again familiar to him, that of Falstad. These were not dreams. Both Varisa and Falstad had braved the dangers of Khaz Modan to save their companion. Their adventure had also been filled with trials and tribulations, but that's a story for another day. Rhonin heard another voice amongst the two that gave him so much hope. The snivelling Krill. Varisa and Falstad had managed to apprehend the vermin to bring them to Rhonin. The orcs must have been too busy with their evacuation to notice the dwarf and elf. When Rhonin opened his eyes, he saw all three at the mouth of his cell, Krill being kept in check with a knife held to his throat by Falstad. With sudden horror, Rhonin realised what Krill planned to do: have both Varisa and Falstad killed by the flame golem. "Look out!" Rhonin cried, but it was too late. The golem coalesced before the rescue party, letting out a torrent of black flame from its mouth. Falstad and Varisa dodged, Krill being tossed to the side. An injured Rhonin watched as his friends valiantly fought against the seemingly invincible beast. The harder they fought, the more Rhonin realised that their deaths seemed inevitable. He had to do something. Summoning what strength Rhonin had left in his beaten body, the wizard broke free of his restraints. As he went to aid his allies, Krill jumped onto Rhonin's back, choking the mage. The wretch was incredibly strong despite his small stature. Rhonin was barely able to get a spell out before suffocating, but he managed to burn the goblin and cease its attack. Rather than go in for the kill, Krill chose to retreat and leave the golem to dispose of all three adventurers. However, as he darted for the door, the golem turned to him and spewed black flame in his direction. The goblin was burnt to cinders. The only thing remaining was the black gem that he had extracted from Deathwing's amulet. Focusing once again on its more direct opponents, the golem spouted fire up towards the cell ceiling, causing a cave-in. One of the falling rocks struck Varisa, giving the golem an opening to blanket the elf in flames. Rhonin saw what was about to befall her, and in desperation reached within himself to conjure whatever he could to protect Varisa. The need to save his friend outweighed the pain in his body, and the mage was able to cast a magical barrier, far more powerful than any he had cast before. The flames the golem spewed reflected right back at it, and to Rhonin's surprise, the creature's own weapon consumed it. Victory was short-lived, however, as the cell completely collapsed. Rhonin came to, an immense pressure in his head. When the mage opened his eyes to try and find a way to relieve the pressure, the cause became clear. The collapsing cell had fallen on Rhonin and his friends, but his barrier had held. The pressure he felt was the part of his mind that maintained the barrier and stopped them from being crushed. The mage could sense from the intensity of the pressure he did not have long to escape. Shifting, he felt something digging into his body. It was the stone from Deathwing's amulet. Pocketing it, Rhonin began to rack his already aching brain for a solution to his predicament. Falstad called out to the wizard. His stirring must have alerted the dwarf. There was no response from Varisa. She was out cold, or worse. Once again, calling upon what strength he had, Rhonin was able to teleport him and his allies to safety. Rhonin was suddenly awakened by a chill wind. Against all odds, he had transported them to a snowy landscape. After discovering to Rhonin's delight Varisa still lived, they realised they now stood on the peak of the mountain that contained the orc's dragon breeding operation. Rhonin had had a long time to think about what Deathwing planned. Why had he tricked the orcs to move out of Grim Batol? The mage believed he had worked it out. Contrary to what Deathwing had told him at the start of the adventure in Khaz Modan, the dragon did not plan to save Alexstrasza, but kill his rival once and for all while she was weak and exposed. As the sun rose, the orcs began their exodus. Necros kept his eyes to the sky, expecting at any moment that the black leviathan would soon swoop down to attack. The orc's grip tightened round the demon soul, intending to use its power to bind the dragon's will to his own. The assault came from an unexpected place. From the crags of the mountainous region, hill dwarves who had aided Varisa and Falstad reach Grim Batol ambushed the orcs. Necros knew dwarves hid in the mountains, but he was surprised by just how many had escaped the horde's wrath. Necros heard a titanic roar. Turning his eyes to the sky expecting to see Deathwing, the orc was shocked to see a dragon of burning red. Rhonin and his two companions looked on helplessly as the battle raged below them. They tried to think of a way to descend the mountain. Rhonin was likely far too drained to teleport them safely again. It was a miracle he managed it the first time. They could end up anywhere, or in the path of an orc axe. Falstad had the answer. During his and Varisa's adventure, the dwarf had become separated from his trusty mount. Producing his calling whistle, the dwarf blew into it hard. No sound coming from it. After what seemed like a lifetime, the griffin answered. The three mounted the beast and headed for the battle. As the three flew toward their destination, Varisa noticed the red drake. Older than the dragons of the horde and not raised in the mountain. The beast twisted and turned in the sky as if fighting an invisible foe. Looking toward the ground, Rhonin saw Necros. The demon soul pointed in the direction of the red leviathan, the object glowing with power. Eventually, the red dragon could fight the demon soul no more. Retreating away from the battle, it soon came crashing to the ground. With the defeat of the red dragon, a different, more terrifying one entered the fray. Deathwing himself. The aspect of death moved with purpose, making straight for the orc column, but Alexstrasza was not his target. Quickly and carefully, Deathwing grasped one of the wagons carrying the eggs of the Dragon Queen. With his own dragonflight all but extinct, Deathwing saw Alexstrasza's eggs to raise a new generation of dragons loyal to him, what would become a devastating force. Rhonin realised Deathwing's intent as the dragon kept swooping in, stealing more and more eggs. Necros had turned his attention to the black serpent, thrusting the demon soul in his direction, but it had no effect. Infuriated, the orc commanded Alexstrasza's last remaining consort, Korialstrasz, who was weakened heavily by a fatal illness, to attack Deathwing. Compelled by the demon soul, Korialstrasz took flight, though he would have gladly fought Deathwing under any circumstances to protect his flight. In the midst of all this, Rhonin and his companions had landed. Varisa wondered aloud where Crassus was, the mage that had sent Rhonin on his impossible mission. He had also been communicating with the hill dwarves for this attack through an amulet, which was given to Varisa by the dwarves to guide her and Falstad through Grim Batol. After all he had been through, realising Crassus had sent him, Varisa, Falstad and the hill dwarves to their deaths, Rhonin was furious with his patron. Taking the amulet from Varisa, he noticed a gem in the centre had worked loose. Fixing it back, Rhonin yelled at Crassus through the amulet, demanding to know where he was. When no answer came, Rhonin went to throw the amulet to the ground. Just before he did, Crassus's voice permeated his mind. "Rhonin, praise be. There may still be hope." Crassus sounded ill, as if dying, and requested Rhonin's aid. Reluctantly, the young mage agreed, but Crassus needed Rhonin to come to him, and without warning, teleported him away from Varisa and Falstad. It was now that Rhonin realised that Crassus was no ordinary mage, but in fact was the red dragon he had seen fall to the demon soul, Korialstrasz, another consort of Alexstrasza who had remained hidden from the horde all this time. Rhonin was not intimidated, giving the dragon a piece of his mind, saying he was no better than Deathwing for orchestrating the chaos that now erupted around Grim Batol. Flinching at the comparison, Korialstrasz admitted he deserved it, but implored Rhonin for his help. The dragon believed the demon soul was the key. Rhonin asked the dragon why the powerful artifact was unable to affect Deathwing. The answer came, but not from Korialstrasz. It came from a serene woman, with her eyes closed. As the dragon soul was created by Deathwing, it could not affect him. She and the other 2 men that accompanied her told Rhonin of how they had cast the soul into the deepest depths, enchanting it so that Deathwing could not wield it himself. But it appeared the black dragon had been able to influence the orcs and help them find it for him to bring destruction to Azeroth. The 3 figures that stood before Rhonin and Korialstrasz were the other 3 dragon aspects: Ysera, Malygos, and Nosdormu. They had isolated themselves from the world, but with persistent urging from Korialstrasz, had come to attempt to stop Deathwing. Like Korialstrasz, they believed the demon soul may be the key. They donated some of their power to heal Korialstrasz, as it would be up to him to drop Rhonin near Necros to try wresting the demon soul from his grasp. The 3 aspects then changed into their spectacular true forms to fight Deathwing. Without a solution, their stand would be worthless. Even with all 3 of the aspects' powers combined, the demon soul housed a large portion of their power, and they would not be able to defeat Deathwing. They flew up to confront the black dragon, Tyrannostrasz's limp dead body in his grasp. Korialstrasz was able to drop Rhonin off near Necros, and the 2 fought. With the demon soul in his possession, Necros had the upper hand, able to knock Rhonin off a ravine, the mage clinging for his life. Before Necros could send Rhonin to his death, he was knocked off his feet by Fulstad and Varisa on top of the griffin. The trio were attacked by another orc, but with nimble spellcrafting from Rhonin, it retreated, turning the brute's axe into a snake-like creature that looked to entwine its wielder. The orc warrior was able to drive the 3 apart, which gave Necros his opening, knocking Rhonin to the floor and placing his peg leg squarely on Rhonin's back. Varisa made moves to save Rhonin, but the orc told her to remain where she was, or he would crush Rhonin's spine. Necros had lost the demon soul when he had been knocked back, and was convinced Rhonin knew where it was. As Rhonin insisted he did not know, the pressure upon his spine increased, until suddenly he felt a wave of heat, and the pressure was gone. Without the demon soul in his grasp, Alexstrasza was no longer controlled by Necros. She had slain the orc, finally avenging all her young that had been sent to die in the name of the Horde. Thanking Rhonin for freeing her, Alexstrasza flew into the air to aid her fellow aspects against Deathwing. But even with her aid, they would be no match for him. Rhonin despaired, as without their full power, the aspects would be bested. Fulstad remarked it was a shame Rhonin could not give them their power back. This gave Rhonin an idea. If he could find the demon soul and break it apart, he knew a spell that could direct the aspects' powers back to them. After a short search, Rhonin found the artifact buried under corpses and rubble. He tried smashing it on a rock, but it didn't even graze the surface. He asked Fulstad to strike it with an axe he had wrestled off an orc. Lifting the weapon above his head, Fulstad brought it down with all his might, but all this succeeded in doing was shattering the axe. When all seemed hopeless, Rhonin remembered Deathwing's scale. Since the dragon had created the soul, perhaps it was only a piece of him that could destroy it. Sure enough, the scale cut through the disc like butter. With their powers restored, the other aspects battered Deathwing. Nosdormu aged him before his time. Malygos pounded him with ice and fire. Ysera awoke his greatest nightmares, and Alexstrasza assaulted him with the pain he had put her through, every child she had lost, and the years of her imprisonment. Deathwing only just managed to break free. Screaming in pain, the dragon flew as fast as he could away from the battle. The others followed, but they would never catch him. Deathwing went into hiding in a different plane of existence known as Deepholm to recover, and one day bring his horrible vengeance to the world. But for now, the threat of the aspect of death had been driven away. With the aid of Rhonin, Varisa, Volstad and Korialstrasz, the Hill Dwarves made quick work of the orcs. What would have been thought impossible was achieved. The Dragon Queen was freed, and the orcs were now on borrowed time. The Horde would soon be vanquished. Rhonin and Varisa were called to all kingdoms of the Alliance to give their accounts of their deeds, and celebrations broke out across the Alliance. Rhonin and Varisa spent more time with each other, and during this period the two fell in love and married. Feelings that had been forming for each other throughout their quest together, despite their poor first impressions. The Orcs, the Burning Legion's preliminary invasion force, had failed them. Their second, the Undead Scourge, would not. I really hope you've enjoyed Rhonin Part 2, guys. If you did, like, subscribe, that YouTube stuff, and if you enjoyed the art, I've linked the artists in the description below. Well, at least the ones I could find. I'm really hoping to get Part 3 out in about a week's time like I did with this one, but I do have a friend's wedding to attend as well, so it may just be a little bit later. Till next time, guys, happy Hearthstoning. Bye bye.